Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm Jenna Green, the Operations and Programs Manager for the Glass Art Society. Before we get the program officially started, we have a few logistics to cover and some online community practices to review. We are recording today's program and we'll post it on our YouTube channel. So we hope you will keep your cameras on. Also, only do so if you're comfortable. We also ask that you keep yourselves on mute unless you are speaking. And if you have any questions or comments, we would love to hear them. And because we know people engage in different ways, you're welcome to either grab the microphone and unmute yourself to speak. You can use the raise hand function so that our moderators here today can see you have something to say, or you can just use the chat box. So there's plenty of options, and we'll do our best to address all those questions. Also, closing extra tabs on your device can help avoid any video delays or glitches. So now would be a good time to go ahead and close those if you don't need them. As our online community practices go, we ask that everyone be respectful, speak from their own experience, and we challenge yourself to not make assumptions. Instead, ask questions and go deeper. We also want to acknowledge that some of us are currently on Indigenous lands, and all across the world, people are dealing with issues of colonialism. For those who haven't been to a GAS student meetup before, these are monthly virtual meetings meant to create a space for students from around the world to discuss glass materials and processes, view lectures and demos, attend virtual studio tours, and meet leaders in the glass community and many other options. Today, our program is moderated by Paige Morris, MFA graduate and current GAS student representative. So with that, I'll hand it over to Paige.
Thanks, Jenna. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. It's my pleasure to introduce our visiting artist and lecturer today, Leah Coodell, who is a Canadian glass artist, and she received a Bachelor's of Art Education from the University of Alberta in 2002, and a Bachelor of Fine Art in Glass from Alberta College of Art and Design in 2015. Leah has worked as an artist in various studios across the globe, including the US, New Zealand, Italy, the Czech Republic, and Croatia, just to name a few. She has received recognition for her dedication and passion for glass art by being the recipient of multiple project grants and scholarships. She was recently a finalist in the International Young Glass 2017, a contemporary glass art competition, and she was a participant in S12 Gallery's exhibition, Young and Loving. Leah's work has been exhibited internationally, and in 2019, she appeared as a contestant on the hit Netflix series Blown Away. So without further ado, welcome Leah, and thank you for spending the afternoon with us today.
Hey guys. All right, I'm just gonna share my screen here for you. Just give me 1 second. All right, so I'm Leah Coodell. If you guys have any questions as we go along, just feel free to type it in the chat or interrupt me. It's totally fine. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things I make and a lot about my career as a glass artist, I guess. I'm going to talk about a bunch of things that I found really useful that I learned from people along the way. Oh. All right. So one of the things I wanted to talk about is success and how we define success. For me, I've done a lot of different things, and I've noticed that a lot of people like to define success for other people. And I find that to be kind of a tricky thing, because unless you measure success for yourself, I feel like success is never attainable. So one of the ways that I like to define success for myself is doing things that I find hard or things that I find tricky. So this piece right here, Drinking Light, is one of those pieces that took me probably a whole year to figure out how to get the plasma neon to work in a cup. And by the time I figured it out, it was like such a self-fulfilling kind of thing. So these are kind of projects that I measure for my own success within my art practice. Another one is just trying things that are outside of your comfort zone. I made these cups that have circuitry in the bottom, and they have microphones at the front, so the lights sync with the sound in the room. And I am not great with tech. And so this project was like so out of my comfort zone, out of things that I'm good at or know how to do. But often those things, even though they're kind of sometimes jankily put together, they turn out to be really interesting projects. And I find that like being willing to take a risk is a really good marker of success. And then you get to see things come to fruition at the end. So here's a little video of how they work. All right. Another way that I really like to think about success is through collaboration. This project here I made when I was in Denmark, and I think it's absolutely hilarious. It's me and a bunch of people from a bunch of different countries who were exhibiting glass for the Young Glass Prize in Denmark in Abeltoft. And we did a program called the Glass Heap Challenge. And so the 5 of us, we had a challenge to reinvent the way that people drink beer and make some interesting beer drinking contraptions for one of the local breweries. And the coolest part of this is when you work with other people, there really is a sense of kind of shared success. You know, you get to share in like the funny things, you get to share when things break, you get to share when things turn out really great. Another thing that I really value in art practice is doing things you're afraid of. How many people out there are afraid of performance art? This was one of the first times I've ever even tried to do something that remotely looked like performance art. So I started exploring the idea of absent space. And so I'd make these glass bubbles and I'd blow them onto molds of my body. And so I could make them fit into different crevices of my body. And then the performance was I had a volunteer come and they would bring all the pieces and then I would hold them for kind of a sustained amount of time. And so this was literally something that I still think is scary, doing performance art. But I think you don't really grow as an artist unless you do some things that scare you. All right. This piece right here, it's called A Moment of Negative Space. And you get to have this moment with somebody else within this bubble. And one of the things I think a lot about with this piece is the idea of like percentages of success. Like most people I've talked to who are artists generally have about 90% kind of fail rate, 90% rejection rate, and only about a 10% acceptance rate. And so upon saying this, I always just want to encourage people to apply for tons and tons of things. Because if it's a 90-10% for most people, if you apply for one thing, there's a very good chance you won't get it. But if you apply for, say, like 10 different things, then there's a better chance that you'll get your 1%. You know, so if you're finding like you're getting so many rejection things or rejection letters, it's a good thing to just bump up the things you apply for, you know, so you can get that 10%. I mean, I think I've gotten at least like 10 rejection letters from Corning and counting. You know, like so many artists, I think we experience a lot more rejection than is ever really talked about, especially when you're an emerging artist and you're first starting out. Yeah, so it's just apply for a bunch of things. This piece I applied for the Young Glass show, and I never ever thought I would get into it. And I did, you know, because I just kept applying for anything and everything.
Leah, what are some things that you've applied to recently, if you don't mind sharing?
Oh, recently it's been very slow because of COVID. There's not a whole lot of things that I can apply for, especially because of all the border restrictions. But some things that I have been applying for are, I'm in the middle of starting a studio. So I've been applying for different kind of local business, kind of economic programs. We have one with our local t-shirt company where people can buy a t-shirt with your logo and they cover the cost of the t-shirt, keeps them in business, and then they also give the proceeds to your company. So I've been applying for different things like that. But as far as glass things, most things I've just been doing online. Lots of online good glass videos out there. All right, so this piece, I would take these glass bubbles and bring them out to the bar or different pubs and get my friends and strangers to hold these bubbles between their mouths. So people could experience kind of that space between them and another person. And the thing I like about this is I like doing projects where I get to bring my friends along, where they get to be a part of seeing glass in public space. And they get to be a part of kind of like the funny awkwardness of art in public life. And I think another reason for me this is important is one of the most important things I learned in school, actually from a teacher, is just the idea that the life of an artist is very up and down. You know, you like do a residency and you get to go to Pilchuck, you get to do these things, and then you have months of nothing. And then, you know, you do something else and you're on a high and you get a project grant or you do all these things and then you don't see anything for a while. And I think that's actually really normal for the life of an artist. And that's why having a really good support network around you, I think is probably one of the most valuable things, at least for me. I mean, I wouldn't be able to be an artist without my support network, just to even be able to navigate kind of all the highs and lows of being an artist, period. All right, this is one of my favorite pieces. The space between myself and I. And the reason I really love this piece is partly because it just took so many people to make it. Like it probably took about 10 people to put this together. Like it was such a collaborative piece. And I also made probably about 6 of these. And every time I would cold work them, I would crack it by accident or something would go wrong and I'd be almost finished and then it would break and then I'd have to like arrange to get everybody together again and make it again. You know, like there was so much failure in making this piece. But this is one of the pieces that that people see the most of what I make, you know? So I can't imagine if I would have given up after like the first 4 or 5 of them that I cracked, you know? And it also, go back. Sorry about that. It also reminds me of this idea of be the last person standing. Because a lot of times being an artist and being a glass artist, you know, people will last for a couple years, 2 or 3 years, and then they might stop being a glass artist. Some people will last a little longer. But eventually the community starts getting really small. You know, I mean, being an artist is it's kind of a hard go of it sometimes. So I understand why a lot of people quit doing what they're doing. And so it's almost like you just have to be the last person standing. You know, if you do glass long enough, eventually you'll get better and better. And eventually things will work out because everyone else might be gone. You know, there'll be less people the longer that you do it, if that makes sense. So I often think about that. I'm like, oh, just keep going. Just have to be the last person standing. Another thing I like to think about success in a way is just letting yourself make weird things. You know, like letting yourself be your weird self. This picture just makes me laugh just because I think it's incredibly awkward and uncomfortable, everything about it, which for me is great. You know, not everyone will like your weird art. You know, lots of people don't like my art, and that's okay. You know, but I mean, the thing that people value is when you let yourself be yourself. Like, I think there's a lot of merit and a lot of success in that. And also being vulnerable. You know, vulnerability is something that makes really good art, I think. This piece I made is called Let's Not. I felt like there was so much in the art world of art that talks about sex. And I wanted to try to create something that in a way talked about not having sex, kind of like the opposite. In a way, I'm not sure how successful that worked out, but it did turn out to be a fun piece, and it definitely pushed me out of my comfort zone to make something a little bit different. All right, this one here, it's unlanded, and I went through a season where I was traveling a lot, and I just never felt like I landed in a country or a place. Like, I always felt like I was kind of hovering because I was never settled. You know, I was just always moving. Yeah, so it's just this like forever floating feeling of never really fitting in or never really landing in a country or a place. And I mean, the thing I think is interesting about art is that you can express how you feel about the world, you know? And often you'll find other people who can experience that and relate to that. You know, it's not going to be everybody, but it's pretty special when you meet other people who feel those same kind of feelings about the world as well. This piece I made after lots of perils of online dating. I'd go on dates with people and I'd feel like the date went really badly and they'd be like, oh, I really felt like we had a connection. And there's a part of me that was like kind of thinking in my mind, like, I don't know if that was connection. I think I just had like decent social skills. So I made this plasma neon piece where when your mouth touches the glass, it like connects your mouths. So the plasma neon goes to your touch. Yeah, and this reminds me a lot of also community. The glass community is really small. And it's really important to celebrate the success of other people. You know, if we can't celebrate the success for each other, when you have a success, who's going to be there to celebrate you if you're not celebrating other people? You know, it's often one person's win can be a win for everybody. All right, so now I'm going to talk a little bit of some of the really unique parts of my career. I've traveled all over the world. I've lived in Norway and Dubai and New Zealand and been through a bunch of different places. And that kind of makes my story a little bit unique, I guess, from other people. So one of the first things about being a glass artist is you might have a mobile studio known as the trunk of your car. I have yet to have my own studio. It's often my car. At the moment, I'm building my own studio in my backyard. But for the last, I don't know, 8 years, this is kind of the reality of what my life looked like. And I think in order to get a kind of a broader view of glass art, it's really healthy to be willing to move. You know, if you only want to stay in one city for the rest of your life, unless you build your own studio, you're going to have a very hard time being a glassblower. Because you'll miss out on a lot of different experiences and a lot of different techniques, actually. One of my very first jobs was at Bocce. I somehow managed, oh, sorry, I'm not good at this. I somehow managed to convince one of my summer teachers to let me have a summer job. And I worked for a couple months and I made millions and millions of these bubble lighting things. And I mean, the interesting part is you just need to convince the first person to hire you as a glassblower or as a caster, cold worker, or whatever. As soon as one person hires you, then you have work experience, right? Like all it really takes is like starting with just convincing somebody that you can do the job, which I feel like I kind of did with this one. And then when I graduated from school, I worked in Dubai and I was a production manager for this company called Chochoma. I never thought I could be a production manager. I didn't really even know what that was. I often felt like I was like faking it. And I think even sometimes if you feel like you're faking it, that doesn't mean you're doing a bad job, right? You know, you're probably doing a perfectly fine job. It's just, I don't know, it's sometimes hard to see yourself as a certain title, but that doesn't mean that that's not you. The interesting thing about this job is the reason I got it is one of my teachers recommended me. And it made me think just how important the people who you cross paths with while you're in school, how important they really are. You know, like every visiting artist, every teacher, all of those people are in your professional field and can open a lot of doors for you. Dubai was very hot. It was blowing glass in like 54 Celsius degrees. There would be like animals running in and out of the studio. It was just like a crazy experience. And that's the interesting thing when you travel around, you realize that studios are very, very different around the world. This was our furnace. Dubai doesn't have a lot of safety laws, as you notice by all the fracks. Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, sometimes you just have to take a job because you need a job. You know, it's not always the ideal, but you do learn something from every job. I ended up having bed bugs in my house, so I decided I would stick all my clothes into one of the kilns to try to kill off the bed bugs. It was like things I never ever thought I would do or need to do in my life happened while I lived in this city. Another place that's really close to my heart is Hot Glass Fiji. I lived in New Zealand for a while and decided that on my way home, it was cost sustained to stop in Fiji. And I had met this lady, Alice, for probably 2 minutes before I went to Fiji. And the cool part about the glass community is if you give people enough notice, people are often very open to having visitors, very open to having people come to their studios, because often their studios are kind of in the middle of nowhere. You know, they don't meet a lot of other glass artists. So it's fun for them and it's fun for you to get to work in different studios. This one is really cool because you could actually see the ocean while you're blowing glass. So kind of behind all those chairs in the picture, the ocean was right there. Yeah, and it's beautiful. But it's one of those things that unless you ask if you can come visit people, you never know what they're gonna say. Alice ended up opening her home to me and I stayed with her in her house for a week and blew glass with them and helped them out and got to see what they were all about. And yeah, I mean, I never would have been able to do that unless I just kind of went out there and took a risk and sent her an email being like, you only met me for 10 seconds, but can I come visit? You know, people can always say no. Like you never know what they're gonna say unless you ask them. I also did this when I was in Croatia, traveling at one point with my family. I asked at the Museum of Glass if I could come visit and hang out for a day. And it's one of those things, as long as you give people a lot of notice and you just kind of offer to watch or open doors or, you know, just to be there in case they need anything, then people are usually pretty good about you coming. The one cautious thing I would say is that don't be the free guy. So what that means is, so glass artists, especially people who are assistants, they work with their normal glass blower and that's how they make their living. And so when you come as somebody who's just traveling and visiting and you work for free, you're essentially taking work from somebody else, you know, who counts on that income. And so when I talk to people, I always make sure that I'm not replacing one of their normal people. You know, so I just come out and hang out and help. I don't want to, you know, in the email, just be like, I don't want to take the place of any of your regular assistants, you know, because those people, they need to be work. And, you know, I've been in situations where, you know, I've been having a hard time even just making enough money from my glass jobs. And then suddenly people come from another country and offer to work for free for a month. And then I'm out of work for a month. You know, that's the part where it gets a little bit hard sometimes. So I always try to be really aware of that when I'm visiting studios. And sometimes you show up at jobs that aren't exactly what you think they're going to be. This job was supposed to be half blowing, half cold working, and it turned into mostly just cold working. You know, and there's not always a perfect job, but it's true that you can learn something from every job. This picture is of the very first day I showed up at work. And they were like, oh, could you cold work all of these tops? And hand lap all of these things today. And I was just like, what am I getting into? That same studio is quite interesting because the glassblowing equipment was very tall. I am only like 5'6". And so I'd be like reheating almost by like my neck sometimes. Like the door handle's really high. You know, every studio is like kind of quirky and you kind of just have to go with it, you know? I mean, people have been doing this for the last 30 years often. You know, they're not going to change their studio just for the one person who comes to visit, right? You have to kind of get into their flow and what they do in their studio in their country. And people like to make you work holidays a lot. It's just a part of working and being flexible. And sometimes you have to cold work under trees outside. This is like a sideways wheel, kind of grinding wheel. So you grind the pieces on the side, kind of that way. And everything in New Zealand grows really crazy. So it's just like, I feel like I was cold working in the jungle for a few days. This is back to that beer beard. Just another reminder to just apply for things, you know, even if you don't really know what it is sometimes, because you can always say no. You know, if there's not enough description, you can apply for things, and then if you get in, you don't have to say yes, right? You know, there's often that people apply for stuff and get it and they can't do it. You know, there's no problem with saying no to something, you know, so then you may as well apply because it's not like you have to immediately do it, I guess. And this is one of those things I had no idea what to expect. And it just turned out to be this really fun, you know, beer drinking adventure. And sometimes people will get you to do really funny things. There's a clip of me on Danish television where they got me to put my head into my sculpture and then interviewed me about my piece while my head was in the glass piece, which is like so ridiculous in hindsight. But yeah, I mean, you just have to not take yourself so seriously sometimes. I did a residency in Murano, and it's one of those things that I applied for and I never ever in a million years thought I would get, you know. So sometimes you get the things that you actually never ever even think you're qualified to do. And this picture is a kind of an interesting segue into this next one. So this is the Blown Away studio in Hamilton and Ontario. And the interesting thing about this studio is that they made it to look like an old Venetian factory. So if you're looking at this picture, like this, so they're modeling it essentially off these Venetian factories. And And so they made it, the cool part for me is actually how they made the set on Blown Away. So everything was brand new. And then they had their set designer come in and they told him to rust everything. So to make everything look like it was really old. But they didn't tell him to not rust things like the Marver. So we showed up on set and they used like these like special chemicals to rust everything. And like all the Marvers are rusted and all the bench rails are rusted. So the day before filming, people were like angle grinding all the Marvers off, trying to get all the rust off of these things. So I mean, they don't know, they're not glass blowers. They're just like making a set for this thing they've never done and don't even really know what it's about, I guess. And so if you look in the background of this picture, it looks like there's like rebar and concrete. The interesting part is that that's actually made out of styrofoam. And so they would use like styrofoam and wood to make things look like concrete and make things look like metal. So before we started, we actually had to go around the studio and they had to point out like, okay, don't touch this with your pipe or this because it's styrofoam and it'll melt. And it's not actually metal, even though it looks like metal. And so it's kind of funny to go around the studio and see all of those things. Yeah, so here's another picture in Italy. So you can see how similar the two sets are.
Leah, where do you search for these opportunities? Like, where do you find these different applications that you're utilizing to travel and get work other places?
Honestly, I do like really lots of Google searching. I look through Facebook pages. Actually, a lot of jobs I've gotten just through searching on like the Glassies Facebook page, or just literally like Googling glass jobs or glass grants. And yeah, you find a lot of things. Also, like every country has their own kind of like glass arts association. And so I'm a part of like the New Zealand one and different ones, and they often post different opportunities kind of on their update pages. So I find a lot of things through that. I hope that answered your question. I know that was a little bit vague. But yeah, I mostly just Google a ton of things just to see what's out there all the time. All right, to continue, unless anyone has any other questions. Okay, so things aren't always as they appear. The funny thing about when you're on a set is that the set designers want to make it really nice. And they don't know, I mean, no one's ever like talked to them about like compatibility with glass or what works and what doesn't. So they had all this tons of this beautiful color. And then they had these jars that looked like frit, but also some of them looked like crushed up glass that were like on the side. I think you can even see it in the picture. Without us knowing, the set designers had gone in and felt like the color cabinet needed to be spruced up a little bit. So they just made jars of random crushed up glass to like fill out the set and didn't tell anyone. So there's like all these jars of like not compatible color. And so after the first episode, people are like, why are there these weird stress fractures in my trails and in my piece? And then we found out that there was like fake frit, which I think is really funny. It's probably like my funniest thing. I think is the funniest of being on this set is, yeah, you don't really know. It's people, they're not glass blowers. They don't know all of these things that we think about, like color needs to be compatible. Yeah, I mean, they're making a TV show first and foremost, I think is the thing to really remember. You know, they're not trying to actually find the best glass blower in the world, right? They're making a TV show so people can know about glass, and you know, they make money off the TV show. And I think people sometimes forget that. Like, it's heavily edited. There's sentences that I can see myself saying on film where half of it was said one day, and then 3 days later, I remember saying the other part. You know, so they can actually edit you to say almost whatever, you know. So I always kind of like tell people to take things with a grain of salt, because they're purposely editing people to look like certain personalities too. You know, reality television, they need to have enough girls versus guys. They need to have enough races. They need to have like this broad age category. You know, so enough people will feel connected to the show. And there's a lot of things going behind scene. You know, like you don't see that we could use glue. You know, that things not everything's assembled hot. Like if you pay attention, there's a lot of like elaborate things that you never see all on the pipe. You know, like they had like UV glue and crazy glue and all this kind of like crazy cold working equipment. I mean, that part was really quick, if I'm honest. You only had 45 minutes from the time you took it out of the annealer to cold work, glue it, and put it on a plane.
How much cold working time did you get?
45 minutes.
Really?
Yeah, so like they started the timer when you open the annealer door, and then you had to have it on the plinth, ready to be judged in 45 minutes. And so like grinding, gluing, and whatever you wanted to do. It was very quick. You know, I wouldn't say that everything that you see on the show is very well cooked, is like nicely cold worked. I think there's a lot of like 80 grit and then UV glue it and dry it. Yeah, it was all pretty, that part is all pretty quick. But I think they like, I don't know about the second season. I think things have improved or changed. There's a few different things. Like we didn't have blocks in the first season for some reason. They could afford 10 glory holes, but not blocks. So I don't know. I think they got to use blocks in the second season. And I always think about this idea of like one person's win is a win for all of us. You know, like even like Deborah winning season 1, you know, that's a win for a lot of people, a lot of women, and a lot of glass artists, right? So oftentimes like people's win on a show like this, it benefits other people. You know, more people know about glass, more people take classes, more people realize that, you know, glassblowing even exists. So, I mean, for me, I think it's all in all a really good thing. Last but not least, if you're ever on television, don't forget that they can turn all the footage into stills. Every single expression you make, like this lovely one. Yeah, so that's it. Do you guys have any questions? Yeah, we can do a little bit of Q&A if you want to type them, or
Yeah, we just got another one from Liz, who asked if they ever made any exceptions during the show. For example, if an assistant dropped your glass, would you get more time?
No, sadly. I had a few assistants hit my piece on the door. I mean, it was a very stressful environment, and that's the thing. They set a precedent at the start that the assistant was not responsible for what happened. But the other thing is that you could choose how much you wanted to use your assistant. So you could solo blow if you wanted. You know, some people use a blow hose for like 90% of what they made sometimes. So it was kind of like that. And then, you know, it just wouldn't be really fair, I guess.
So Vicky's asking how did the show change or impact your creativity?
It actually reminded me that I like having a brief, and I like having a short period of time to come up with an idea. Like I didn't realize that I would like thrive so much in like actually being able to be creative under pressure and under a quick time length. So I've actually, well, I haven't done it yet because I'm injured, but I'm gonna kind of start giving myself smaller briefs and trying to work quicker through creativity. Yeah, I also, one of the biggest things is I really wanted to just be myself on the show. Like I really wanted to be really authentic. And I didn't realize how hard that is to consciously be authentic and be yourself, especially when there's so much pressure, you know, and when it's stressful. Like you really have a choice to just be yourself or, you know, fit into like the cookie cutter shape of what people are looking for.
Caroline's asking how the show impacted your career as an artist.
Well, I definitely sell a lot more glass than I used to. I think the biggest thing for me is exposure. And it's one of those things like, even bad exposure sometimes is good exposure in a way, you know, like even the people who didn't really think, like may have not had a great edit on the show, there's so many more people who see their work and so many more, I think just everyday people, you know, like it was really valuable to me to have more than just glass people see what I make. Yeah, it helps me sell more and it helps me actually like make a living as an artist. Yeah, that's been really good in that way.
Yeah, I remember when that show came out and just having already being a part of the glass community, following a lot of people on Instagram, just like seeing the numbers of followers and comments and likes on like the contestants' accounts just like increase exponentially. Is that a place where you feel like you are also marketing yourself a lot? Like, is social media playing a key role? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, I sell probably like 90% of glass I sell is to people on Instagram. Or at least that's where they find me. Yeah, social media is actually really helpful. I mean, it is a little overwhelming sometimes when you can't respond to everybody, when you get lots of messages. But like, I'm kind of on like the low end. Like Canadians, we don't really have the same celebrity cultures in the US, I think. It's a little bit different culturally. But like, I can't even imagine some of the people who have like hundreds of thousands of people following them, you know. I think that would be really overwhelming.
I kind of wanted to circle back to something you said, Leah, about that idea of kind of challenging yourself with briefs and like that quick turnaround to kind of spark your creativity and create something. So I guess it's two questions. One, what was your favorite one from the show and like your favorite piece that you created? And then once you're well and your studio's up, what types of these like briefs are you wanting to try and explore?
Yeah. Well, I actually went through a phase where I would like automatically generate artist statements from the internet and then make art about that. So I might continue to do some of that. And then there's also a part of me that's kind of curious to like try some of the challenges from the second season.
Oh yeah, and then I was gonna ask, have you seen the second season?
Yeah, well, lots of people ask me like, oh, what would you have made? And I was like, well, I don't know. I haven't really thought about it. Mm-hmm. But I'm kind of curious to like get myself to just go through that process of trying the briefs. Sorry, what was the other part of the question? Was that everything?
I think so. Oh, just what was like either the piece you liked the most or that you had the most fun making, kind of like the way back then when that happened.
I mean, honestly, I think the piece that I got kicked off on is probably my favorite. I'm in this like cleavage cup and a fanny pack decanter. Mm-hmm. And I think I like that the most, partly because I actually just still think it's hilarious. It's like just one of those things that I'm like, I don't know. It's so like my sense of humor. And I just think it's really silly. And it just makes me laugh, the amount of people that I like have funny conversations talking to them about it.
Do you still have it or have you sold it by chance?
No, we actually don't get to keep the pieces. They keep everything. Your contract says that they can or cannot give the pieces back to you. Yeah, we signed like a 40-page contract. So you like sign away your rights to how you're perceived, how you're portrayed, and all of these things. I'm not even actually contractually, I can't make an identical replica of things on the show. So I can do like a 2.0 version if I change the shape or the color and it's a different piece. And then that part I know, like the contracts I think changed with the second season. But yeah, it's kind of interesting. Just looking at the comments. How did I get into glassblowing? I actually took a summer course for a week and just really loved it. And I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I'd always wanted to go to art school. So then I decided at that point that I would actually pick an art school with a glass program. Yeah.
I was actually wondering if you could talk about the role of intimacy in your work.
Oh. That's a tricky one. I mean, because a lot of what I make is this idea of the presence of absence. And it started with the idea that when somebody passes away, the places they inhabit almost become highlighted, you know, like the chair that your grandma used to sit in all the time. When she's not there, you almost become hyper aware that she no longer sits in that chair. You know, like these places that people normally inhabit once they pass away, yeah, become highlighted. And so most of my work stems out of that idea and then into this idea of the absent space between people. And the intimacy part I think is really interesting because the thing that draws me to make this kind of work is I love those moments in public almost where you're, you know, using a glass piece of somebody else. And it's kind of like this uncanny awkwardness. Like, I like the awkwardness of intimacy in a sense, you know, like meeting somebody new and things are kind of awkward. I don't know, like there's a part of my personality that I'm just already a little bit awkward. And I've all of that's kind of gone into my art practice. So I kind of have just embraced the awkward moments of just sitting with people because I think there's a fine line between something that can be really awkward to something that can be really beautiful. You know, like where's that moment where you like aren't friends with somebody and become friends with somebody, right? Like there's always like a really fine line, and that fine line switch I think is really interesting. Yeah. I mean, it's all kind of interesting now, especially with COVID. Like a lot of my pieces you can't even use, and a lot of things I've been thinking a lot about just this space between people. I've become so much more heightened to doing things just online. And so when I'm actually with people in person, it's like it feels weird. Like I don't know how close to sit, or it's like all of these things that normally would come really naturally become a little bit more heightened. So I've been kind of thinking about a lot of my work within that context now too.
Yeah, that's a great point that I feel usually comes up in every conversation for the past year of like how COVID has impacted your practice and just your livelihood, basically. So yeah, I'd like to hear a little bit more about what you are because thinking of just your performance art and then all of those interaction pieces, like what do you think you'll want to do next?
Yeah, that's a tricky part. Because I mean, lots of what I used to do, I can't really do. Mm-hmm. But I guess I almost have to like think of it in like, how do I do something in a new context? Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, the piece with my like the imprints of body on either side, like the really big hanging one. I mean, that one, like I feel really emotional about it sometimes because I like miss being close to people. And so like even just like thinking about older pieces, it's like a whole different emotion. Mm-hmm. Yeah, art is one of those things you never really know when you get to the end of an idea. Right? I mean, I've been dealing with the same kind of idea for quite a long time now. So I'm kind of right at the point where like, am I still interested in this idea, or, you know, and am I interested in other things? Yeah, I mean, for me, it's a little bit funny because I ruptured my Achilles, so I haven't been able to like walk and blow glass for a couple months, for like almost 6 months now. So most of my art practice has been confined to what I can do in my kitchen. Yeah, so I've been playing a lot with doing some stained glass and soldering things and making like glass and resin pieces, which is like kind of like a whole another like product design area. That's a little like quite different from my conceptual work in a sense. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not really sure what I'm gonna make next.
I'll be very curious to see, and especially as time has progressed, and each in the States, each city and state handles just like general human behavior differently, and protocols, and then different countries handle it differently. So it's interesting to see, especially for artists that have that kind of human element or interaction, what like this next phase of especially in-person types of exhibitions or experiences are going to be. I'm very curious.
Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking a lot about like that in-between space from going from online to in person. Like, what does that look like to create art that helps you be able to be in person with people again?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of like the start of an idea.
I've got a question from Vicky. Can you talk about the process when someone commissions a project for you? How do you scope out the project?
It depends how big or how little it is. Anything that's big, like say a chandelier or like something that involves lots of pieces. The number one thing I do actually is just to make sure that I can price it so I'm not going to lose money. It's like one thing to make a vase and you maybe didn't price it right and you lose, I don't know, $10. But it's another thing when you make 100 of something. It's very easy to not price out all the materials and all the cost appropriately. And then that $10, it like becomes exponential. So probably the first thing I do is like, I just price out everything, just to make sure I'm actually pricing things properly. And then, I mean, I talk to people and ask them what they're inspired by, where they got this idea from, because lots of times people have a picture that they've been looking at or thinking of. They don't, I mean, as creative people, we imagine a lot, but like people who aren't creative often start with imagery. So I always find it really helpful to ask people what's like that imagery that they're inspired by. People spend tons of time on Pinterest. They have like lots of things they're inspired by.
And then Catherine asked, where do you blow glass until your studio is built? And can you tell us more about the build?
The build right now looks like a swimming pool. It is a hole of concrete because it's winter in Canada and it has been really cold for a while. But we're just, we've almost had all the concrete poured and then the framing will go up. Yeah, it's a big project. I'm very excited though. I'm trying to build a studio that's relatively sustainable. So I'm going to use a biofuel burner. And I'm trying to scale things appropriately in the studio. I know everybody here has probably blown glass somewhere where they're making like a tiny paperweight in a glory hole that's like human size. I've had a lot of jobs where that's the case. And I just always feel like it's such a waste of energy and resources. So I'm trying to kind of scale the size of things to be appropriate, so the annealers can fit enough glass for like a 4-hour slot or kind of things like that. So it'll be a little bit different than a lot of studios. And I also have a very small pot. So when I visited the lady in Fiji, she had a studio where she would just turn it on in the morning, heat up the glass for 5 hours, blow glass for 4 hours, and then turn it off. And for her, her biggest advice was decide what kind of lifestyle you want and then build your studio around that kind of lifestyle. You know, if you don't want to work weekends, design your studio so it's a Monday to Friday type thing. You know, if you don't want to have a furnace running all the time and have to babysit that, you know, and lose the flexibility of going places, then have a small pot. And I mean, there's like concessions, you know, I won't have perfectly bubble-free glass. You know, it might be a little bit seedy. But it's like there's things I have to kind of be like, okay, you know, glass blowers care if the glass has bubbles. Nobody else really does, in a sense. You know, so I'm kind of figuring out all of those little things. Well, right now I can't, as far as blowing glass, I can't actually walk properly yet. I just got out of my cast. So I haven't really been blowing glass anywhere. But usually I have to drive to Calgary, which is like 3 hours from where I live, to blow glass when I do blow glass. Which is like another thing, to be a glass artist, you sometimes have to sacrifice things like time, you know? Are you willing to drive 3 hours to blow glass? Like, how important is it to you? You know, it's not ever convenient sometimes. You just have to figure it out and make it work. Yeah.
Little bit of a follow-up. So with you building a studio at home, do you envision like wanting to travel again or anymore like in your future? Are there any certain types of residencies or other types of like studios you would want to work for in other places? Or are you pretty like ready to stay where you are?
I'd love to still travel. I mean, I won't take jobs where I like move for a year or two and work for that job. But because my furnaces kind of turn on, turn off, because it's such a small pot, I like the idea of being able to actually like go do residency. Or, you know, I like traveling, period. So I'd like to still be able to do that. I'm really interested in the Middle East a lot right now. I'm cooking a lot of Middle Eastern food. So I'd like to actually go back there. And,
you know, what part of the Middle East are you interested in?
well, I've been trying to figure out where there are actually studios there. Like I've lived in Dubai and worked at a studio there. But I think there's one on the West Bank where they make glass. And I thought that would be
Too bad. So someone who was on the call earlier, his name's Ariel. He is in Israel and he just finished up his degree. So next time.
yeah, those are the kind of people I want to meet. I just want to go back to the Middle East. I love it. It's such a cool part of the world. It's just hot. That's the only downside. Glowing glass and it's really hot. It's not that nice. But I just think it's really interesting when like the studios that people don't really know about and all these like historical practices that aren't on social media or aren't, you know, that I think is really interesting, like preserving that culture and visiting those kind of places. Any other questions?
Last lingering questions from anyone?
I'll ask a question. You were talking about the studio you're building that you are building it sustainably. And I'm just curious, like where you looked to gain information on like what you needed to do that. I feel like that's something we've been talking about a lot, even like within gas, is like, what does a sustainable studio look like or practice look like? And so, yeah, I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a broad thing. I've just picked a couple things to start with as far as sustainability. I mean, sustainability can be this massive thing that can be endless. So one of the things I think a lot about is just waste glass. Because I've worked at a lot of studios that throw out so much waste glass. So I've been trying to kind of come up with different products to use waste glass, different ways to recycle, you know, different, like if you take all of your waste color and put it in a pot, it actually all the colors burn out except the cobalt. So you actually get really nice blues. So designing products around like reusing that type of glass, or just like I've been doing like glass and resin together. So I'm trying to take something that I've seen from my experience as an issue and how I can resolve that. So is that one. Fuel consumption, so trying to use biofuel, so different kind of, it's basically like old deep fryer oil. And I think with the last gas conference, they actually set up their biofuel burner. There's a demo, I think in Florida maybe. But yeah, that one, and then just size of things. You know, finding out, like trying to keep things within a size limit, so it's not wasting on either end, but then it's not too small that I can't make everything I need to make. And I basically just kind of thought through the idea of like, there's only like 10% of the time that people need you to make really huge things. Like such a small amount of your commissions are massive, unless that's like your business model to make massive things. So I've just decided that instead of scaling up to fit the biggest thing people ask for, you know, I can actually have something smaller, and then I can go to other studios that have bigger equipment to make the one piece. And then that for me would be a little bit more sustainable. And then I can do like the turn off, turn on type format for a studio. And I like the idea, like if you're sick one day, you just don't turn the furnace on. And then you don't feel guilty that you're burning all of this gas and paying for it and wasting a day in the studio, you know, where the furnace is going and nobody's using it. So, I mean, for me, it allows for kind of the type of lifestyle that I want to live. I thought that was good advice.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thank you for sharing.
Right.
So to be, oh, sorry.
Oh, no, that was it. I just said no worries.
So just to be conscious of your time and everyone else's, I want to thank you, Paige, for moderating this conversation, and a special thank you to our guest, Leah, for joining us today. Want to thank all of you for joining us, whether you're live or watch this recording later. Speaking of which, it will be available within the next week or so, and you can find it on the GAS website and our YouTube channel. And we also would like to give a special thank you to all of our donors. GAS programs, services, and benefits would not be possible without contributions from people like you. And the next GAS student meetup will be April 13th. So stay tuned for more information by checking the GAS website, and then also signing up for the GAS Monthly Digest. So I have one last final plug, which is that we are looking for applications and nominations for a second student representative, specifically someone outside of North America. So please stay tuned, look for information on our website, and apply by this Friday. So that is all for that. Paige, do you have any last words you would like to leave us with?
No, I think that's it. Also, there's some student opportunities regarding the virtual conference, like the student exhibition. And I believe, is that deadline this Friday as well to apply, or is that March 15th?
They're a little scattered. So the next one will be March 15th.
Okay. Yeah. So definitely check out the website and apply for that. It's free to apply, and there are awards.
All right. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Leah.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.